So here we are. Welcome, everyone, again. We're just going to try to work through a lot of the questions that we spawned with our other questions. So we're going to let Sog lead us here, and I'm going to throw it to you.
All right, thanks. So I watched the interview 3 times throughout the week, or listened to it while I was working. Just kind of had it running through my head, and as the week went on, I've jotted things on my whiteboard up here. And I wanted to start right at the beginning of the interview. Diggs asked for examples of what a murder box was, trying to get a feel for what exactly is Steven trying to avoid with this game, and what's an example of it? So what is a murder box? So I'm gonna go on a wild guess, and that a murder box just basically means that all you're really doing is fighting and trying to kill other people. And it's constant war and constant battle, and you just feel like you're respawning and going again, and you might as well be playing Battlefield or Call of Duty or something like that in a fantasy environment. But I want to take that and I want to say, maybe that's a bad thing. That's not what he wants. But I think that there's a risk on the other side where it's the opposite of there always being conflict and always being battle, because if the node system works as intended, then players get an additional benefit for being a part of a metropolis. And if you're a citizen of a node that's progressed to a higher stage, you have access to more things. So people benefit. Example I used for when something like this was taken advantage of by players is at the launch of Star Wars: The Old Republic, there was one open PvP zone, and it was a cyclical event. So the Sith and the Republic, they fought, and whoever finally won got a reward. And then the event started over. The player base soon realized that, well, if one team wins real quick, the event will respawn. And then the other team can win real quick. And then everyone is getting rewards faster. So what happened in the game community, this was an area that was designed to be the war, right? This is the war zone. This is where we battle against the opponents. But the sides agreed that it's our turn to lose. You guys take the reward. Oh, it's our turn to win. You guys don't fight us. Okay, no problem. So if you tried to actually play the game, people got mad at you. So my concern is on the other side of this, because we're incentivizing the pinnacle of the node, right? So both sides, different sides, everyone wants to be part of Metropolis because their character benefits, right? So why would you ever want to, well, we're not going to tear apart your Metropolis, and you're not going to tear apart our Metropolis. And guess what? We all get Metropolis.
Well, here's benefits. The thing that I think is going to be a little bit different is it's going to be more like Beavis and Butthead passing back the same dollar for the dollar chocolate bar sales, and then they pass the dollar, eat a chocolate bar, pass the dollar, eat a chocolate bar, until they've both eaten both their chocolate bars, passing a dollar between them. So I believe that's going to be more what it would be if you try to do something like that in AOC, because it's going to end up that two nodes that are constantly knocking each other over in this way would just end up depleting their resources and not getting anything for it. Where the SOTOR reference that you gave, there's something coming from the server. It's not coming from the players. It's coming from the server, the reward. So there's nothing on the line there. It's a plus sum exchange regardless, versus it's zero sum at best in AOC.
If you're not fighting and you're not expending resources on fighting, then it is a positive sum, because you have access to the things that only exist in the Metropolis, right?
So I think there's...
Or am I just totally misunderstanding this?
You can't... The Metropolis is something that won't have another Metropolis next to it. You're not going to have, New York next to Los Angeles, if I'm not mistaken. there was
Well,
some degree of separation that has to occur, that they can't be too many high priced players in the same area, because it would require everyone else to be either incredibly high or incredibly low around them. So maybe I'm a little bit mistaken on that mechanic.
Well, so the zone of influence of the metropolis will be butting up against others if the server actually does reach a point where there's 5 metropolises. So the max the server can have is 5 metropolises. Everything else has to be 1 lower than that, so that none others can get as high as metropolis. Everything, the max would be a city. And what we did learn last time that I was not aware of before the interview with Steven is that the zone of influence of a metropolis is 1/5 of the world. So the zone of influence could be and would be, it sounds like, butting up against the other metropolises if there's 5. But the other things to think about would be that the different types of metropolises. There's economic, science, divine, and military. So the server would have to decide which ones and how many they want, how many of each type that they want. And part of what influences the content in the zone of influence will be the buildings that each city or metropolis builds. So it won't just be, do I want a science metropolis, but what buildings will I want in that metropolis? And then, how are the leaders taxing the area? There's a variety of things that will be weighing in and impacting the citizens, and the citizens of the nodes, the citizens of the neighboring nodes, and the citizens of the server itself. Does your server want to have fast travel at all on their server? And do the people who build a science node want to build whatever buildings it takes to create those portals? If that answer is no, are people going to rush in and make sure that once the science metropolis exists, they're going to knock it down so they can have another military one, or they can have another economic one? But also, is that science node going to build the buildings that are responsible for a fast travel portals, or will they need to build a second science metropolis that is willing to build that if the first one isn't? And then the other things that we have to think about are, what will the differences be for the races? Because there's 9 races if we're including the Tulnar, and there's only 5 metropolises, and the race that contributes the most to the advancement that leads up to the metropolis is going to be the one that's predominant in that metropolis. And I think it's fairly likely that racial progression is going to be tied to that. So in some ways, sure, you're going to want, you might get into what Zog is saying, like, I'm a Pyre, and last month it was a Tulnar metropolis. This month I want to turn that into a Pyre metropolis so I can work on my racial progression. But you can only siege every, I think that's going to be 2 months, 1 or 2 months. I think it's 2 months.
I'm suggesting
so how long
that
will
people
that
won't siege. I'm saying that people won't siege.
I know, but I'm saying people will have to siege if it's tied to racial progression, and I can't progress my race unless I have a Tulnar node or a Tulnar metropolis.
Some group of people will organize on a different server to ensure that that happens there, and then that'll be where your home is.
Well, I think the key word you used was reward. And so what does that mean within this game? Yeah, there will be benefits to certain types of metropolises, but there will be other things besides just the benefits that those leaders will be responsible for. So if they are not acting in a way that you would like to see within that world, whatever that might be. I mean, I could have my farm. Somebody builds a new metropolis. They start basically taking everything I'm worth in taxes. Yeah, I could, I guess, roll on another server, but that sort of will take away from the fun that I think they intend us to have as far as creating a story.
I think that'll be an issue or a thing at the beginning where servers are maturing and they're finding out who are going to be the leaders and what's going to happen. But what I see happening is the opposite of we have a murder box, but that as things get stable and as things settle down, that it'll be, this is the way that the server is, and player, like, you or I or one player going into the game plays the game as if the existence of this metropolis is the same as the existence of Stormwind, and that this is a risk that people just decide that they don't want to fight.
I think it's possible, but I think the difference there is in Stormwind you don't have the option to go kick someone out. I think Diggs, you had linked a video of Lord British talking about the ecology of Ultima Online initially and how they thought, well, we're going to put in all these different animals. They'll go kill the things that are trying to kill them. They'll leave everything else alone. Basically, is sort of what that video said. But that didn't happen.
Not if you skill up by killing everything and get resources by killing everything.
But it's not even skilling up. It's just that gamers like to kill shit.
Well, that's my point. If given the option to band together and say, you know what, this might be cool. I'm just going to, not even because you necessarily want a different metropolis, but just because you can. There might be a group that wants to be that militaristic sort of PvP group that just wants to remove everybody. I don't know. But I think if you have the option, that hopefully would prevent from something becoming a Stormwind. That you actually have the option to go in and do this. And some people will just probably find that challenging. That might be their rating. Their rating is to go in and do this. I mean, how easy will it be done? I don't know. But
well, here's the other thing.
That,
go ahead.
There are people like that. There are people that want to stir stuff up. But that if you want to stir up trouble, that you're like the people in the Star Wars, the Old Republic situation that decided that they wanted to PvP today, and everyone on the server was just mad at them, right? So everyone's screaming and yelling. They're typing as fast as they can. Stop killing the Sith. We need our reward. So this thing where there will be people that want to have uprisings or want to do stuff, but they'll be shunned. It'll be
I don't think that's the case at all. I think what we're going to see a lot more of is the internodal strife, not the metropolis is being knocked over, but the internodal strife where we see a lot of the battles, and by accident, more likely than on purpose, metropolis is going to get knocked down because all of the nodes around it got knocked down too far because of the internodal strifing going on, not because there is this concerted effort of we're going to knock these people over so we can build a different one. That's more what I expect to happen.
And to finish
I think that's part of the ideal. I think that's part of the vision. I think that's the way that it's supposed to work. But I'm taking this to a far extreme, right? And saying, well, if everyone knows that if they fight and they go back and forth and they fight too much, then everyone just keeps getting knocked down a little bit, and then they start losing stuff, that there will be this feeling of, it's that big communal thing that is more important. Like, they don't care about dying ones. They don't care about getting corruption or whatever the problem is. It's like, you know what? We want to keep our node. You want to keep your node. Cool. We all like being part of this metropolis. Let's be happy together. Can we have tea?
To finish my thought, and to use an example where this is not intended, again, with World of Warcraft, where there is no real attention, here. So why, when there were several times I could go to Ironforge or somewhere that's a predominantly Alliance-controlled area. Why in the hell would these Horde people come and kill the Griffin Rider so that I can't go somewhere? They don't get anything out of it. Why do they do that? Because they can.
Because they can't possibly lose anything.
Fun.
They can. Well, that's my point. Now you throw this in where it actually causes change.
and they won't want the change. That's what I'm suggesting.
Oh, I think
players won't want the change.
Well, I hope you will see, rival metropolises even, or something where you have sort of war parties, raiding parties to go and just cause disruption, just to do it.
Well, and it doesn't, but again, it doesn't even have to get there. If I find myself on a server where there's 2 military metropolises and there's no science metropolis, I'm going to be raiding one of those military metropolises regularly. And it doesn't matter whether and how many people I have, but I think there will be a lot of people doing that. And it's the same thing if I'm a Vex character and I need to raid that in order to get my Vex racial progression. And I'm not even a PvPer, but if that stuff is locking out, I mean, it's one thing, if I have all of the metropolises that I want on my server and that I started out on, maybe that's great. But I would imagine there would be other people like, PvPers who would be wanting as many military nodes on their server as possible, and they might be knocking down my science metropolis because they want to turn it into a military metropolis.
I mean, that actually is a good point too with it, Sog, that I think you weren't necessarily trying to make, is how, I don't want to say punishing, but how easy should it be for someone to just go to a different server? Like, well, I don't like this anymore, I'm just going to hop somewhere else and start over again. Like, what should there be?
Well, you have to worry about
that?
Where's your freeholds going to be put? Where's your housing going to be? Is there going to be, what kind of housing do you have? Do I have a mansion? Because I was one of the first people in my node, and so I want to make sure that I have a mansion wherever I am. Or am I going to be willing to settle for instance housing because I want to be on a science metropolis? I mean, I'm not going to give up my mansion in order to get an instance house.
I mean, I really hope they don't. I think sometimes there's a tendency to over spawn servers initially, and you end up with low pops. I don't know what that will happen here. I almost wish they would. I know it's kind of a pain when you first log into a game and it's like, Q, you're number 2,400. Wait time 11 hours. That sucks, and I know they probably don't want that for a PR reason. But I kind of hope they don't overestimate how many servers they'll need, just because I think that would be a deterrent between people just dropping and going somewhere else, is if you don't have a lot of other options, just to make you stick it out and try to cause change.
Yeah, I want to move on to the next thing that I have on my board here.
Okay, so let me just follow up. I think maybe, though, with all the PvP, well, it depends on how many PvP people stick around, but from what I'm hearing of the PvPers, it seems like we'll have plenty who will want to fight just to fight. But
and on that note, one of the topics that came up was zerging, right? And came up, and I want to relate this back to players doing what the devs expected, and or not, because Steven's solution to zerging was to internal strife, and his belief in the interview was that zergs will naturally fall apart because there will be bickering within the leadership, and that eventually these large groups would fall apart, and that is how he's envisioning that his solution to large groups of people just taking over is his expectation of how people are going to play. And yes, that's all possible. It's possible that, eventually things fall, people aren't having fun or not, or rewards aren't being distributed equally or whatever, and that eventually it falls apart. But I think that it's a little bit of a soft solution, right? That a better way to handle it, in my mind, and I want to run it by other people, and I've mentioned previously in the past that zerging is a strategy that, has been solved in the real world. Like, The Battle of Thermopylae, the movie 300 was like, it's an example of solving a Zerg problem, right? 300 people holding against basically an endless army, and that the easy way to ensure that there's not a major Zerg problem is for nodes or populations that build up or landforms to make it difficult for Zerging to be a beneficial war, right? It's a beneficial war strategy. Castles themselves are designed to make it so you can throw as many people as you want against the wall, and we'll keep raining arrows and oil and whatever on you. And then, you know what, we'll back up, and then you walk right into another trap, and you have to say, and your Zerg basically has to be never ending to win unless you come up with a different strategy. So this is, we have, as humans in the real world, developed numerous solutions to the Zerging problem, but we never find them in games. And when we ask, like, is Zerging going to be an issue? Can a mega guild come and just Zerg everything? And the answer isn't, well, Zerging's stupid. We solved that. Like, we have narrow ravines, we have meaningful castles, we have all of these real world solutions to it. It's, oh yeah, they'll just fall apart from internal strife. So what will they fall apart from internal strife, or will, Goon Squad take over an entire server, or something like that?
Eve is exactly where I went. Because that's one of the big ones that I think of, specifically Goon Squad actually playing the game and being a big Zerg force. But beyond that, just the idea of, like, there's a lot of stuff that happens in Eve and a lot of things where a whole lot of people are involved. But the biggest battles, the ones we hear about, always happen by accident. It's always when you jump the mothership into, the wrong place, and then all of a sudden a giant battle ensues, and the next thing you know, like, 100,000 real world dollars worth of ISK have been burnt in this gigantic battle. That's one of the things I think about with Eve is, sure, there's like huge battles and stuff, but the biggest ones, the ones that are always, the historic ones from record that we hear about in the news, those happen by accident. And so it's, I wonder how much we can really even relate one game to the other with that, because I feel like with Ashes, it's a very deliberate thing to go and attack a castle. These aren't going to be, floating castles that you've got floating duchies and cities and towns basically surrounding in space. No, they're all going to be in fixed locations. And so I don't know exactly how much you'll be able to, like, prepare for an attack. If, maybe you can go in the area and clear the woods that would have normally prevented your attack, or, start sneakily building a whole bunch of ropes that, affixed to rocks and stuff, so you can rappel down the side of the mountain and come in from an angle that's totally not expected. That's the sort of stuff that I'm, wondering if that's the extent of what's going to be required to actually Zerg, if there's going to be a lot of prep required, and if it's the sort of thing where that amount of prep can be seen far and wide and people can actually make a response before the battle even happens.
Well, I'm wondering how Zerg is being defined, actually, because we had a whole week-long battle about what Zerg even means. So what is a Zerg?
So throwing massive, overwhelming numbers of people to the point where it might not even be possible to fully coordinate, but it doesn't matter because you've just got so many bodies you're throwing at the situation.
So what's your minimum for a Zerg?
It's scalable based on the size of the game. If the most people you're ever going to see in a fight is 100 per side, then coming in with 100 at a place that's got a security detail of 10 people and then following up to the next place that has a security detail of 20 people, et cetera, et cetera. You're going to keep that train of destruction rolling until you start reaching an area where it's too well defended, and you might decide to simply go around it and hit other areas. It depends on, again, also the actual goal. Are you going to make the march to the Capitol and try to burn it down? Are you just trying to destroy all of the stuff nearby to drain their resources and potentially allow for you to start encroaching your metropolis and its terrain into this area that you're starting to, knock down on the fringes?
So as a quick way of defining it, I would say that you're zerging if your only strategy is overwhelming with numbers. And that is that there's no pincer movement, there's no we're bringing in siege equipment, it's we got a whole bunch of people, what you gonna do about it? We're coming. I think that is the basic definition of zerging. It just creating an overwhelming for size-wise.
So, and I covered this a little bit with Steven, although it might have gotten a little lost because he knew what I was talking about. The primary strategy that I heard prior to the interview with Steven that we can see in previous talks of his and that we can see in the wikis is fast travel. And so for him, a key point to Zerg's forming is fast travel facilitating that. So you hear about, an event pops up, like I guess in Rift, the monster pops and people run and, are able to gather. So one of his strategies is to prevent or limit the ability to everybody to run to form a Zerg and just attack a problem with a mass of people. So hopefully you have more strategy than just that, even if it's scheduling the siege weeks in advance. So limited fast travel is one of his responses. But the other is how you build up your defenses, whether it's going to be for a castle, whether it's going to be for a caravan, or whether it's going to be for a metropolis, is that you have objectives. Even for guild wars, there are objectives that you have to complete in order to succeed at the guild war instead of, fail. Even with a caravan, that's going to depend on how many people, how many players are pooling their resources to build up the caravan. You can build each caravan, each wagon individually. You can hire NPCs to help you. And so I think, you can plan your routes. And so some of that for a caravan is going to be that you can't, once you figure out where the caravan is, you can't just call your whole guild over and say, oh, I found it, everybody come and take out the caravan. It's going to be fairly localized people. But also, you aren't necessarily going to know the number of wagons that are going to be in the caravan. You won't know in advance. You won't know what kind of defenses it will have, and you won't necessarily be able to just throw a lot of bodies at it. You will probably have to be using specific, not specific, not too specific, but you'll have to adjust to the defenses that the caravan has built up. That's definitely going to be the case for metropolis sieges. You have specific objectives, and again, I think how you build your buildings, how you build up the various defenses, especially if you've got metropolis and you've got so many nodes in between city nodes and village nodes, and how do you get close enough to the metropolis to even get at it? So it's going to be more strategic than that because there's objectives built in that you have to think about are you bringing siege engines, and what type of siege engines? Or do you need a different type for different races? Do you need a different type for different styles, for a science metropolis versus a economic or versus a military metropolis, plus the layout and design of the building? So I think it's going to be more elaborate than just throwing bodies at it.
See, I feel like caravans are where this might happen. I don't feel like sieges necessarily. I mean, it could, but at least with a siege, you're given a warning, so you can start to prepare what your defense is and what you're going to do. It's not like they just show up and they come in. The same with nodes. Now, conceivably, as within a zone of influence, if you have a metropolis that's kind of over you, you could in turn ask for help. So that could be part of, there's a delay. So you could request people to come help protect your node, unless of course it's the ruler of the metropolis themselves. But so I feel like as far as the nodes, there's going to be some protection against that. I actually do worry about caravans, though. I hear what you're saying. You can kind of pick a route and when to go. The reality is there's going to be probably very clear connections between areas. So you're going to most likely have a good idea of where the majority of caravans are going to go. And then you're also going to most likely know when they're going to go, because by nature, most players will play certain times of the day. So unless we're able to schedule, I don't know how that will work. Maybe they'll let us, offline schedule a caravan for 3 a.m. I mean,
the Zerg would treat caravan hunting like fishing with a net.
Well, I mean,
right?
That's what I'm saying. You're going to, I hear, something spawn. You can't just have everybody come from all corners of the area. But if you're a group and you're actually, tonight is caravan fishing night, you're going to have a general idea of where you should be. And that's, I worry more about caravans and Zergs than anything. And I worry about that too, because for everyone outside of that metropolis, I mean, those are going to be crucial parts here. So for me as a farmer, if I'm going to do anything meaningful as far as gaining coin or whatever, I'm going to have to rely on those versus if I was actually in the metropolis doing something where I don't really have to worry so much necessarily every day about a siege.
Right, but again, that should depend upon how you're building your caravan. What are the materials it's being built out of? What are the defenses that the caravan has? What NPCs are you hiring to protect the caravan? What types? What race? What abilities? What augments do they have? In addition to the players who are going to come and defend that. So the strategy for the caravan people are going to be trying to make defenses that are likely going to be able to
the least expensive, effective defense for the caravan.
And that's what I was going to say. That yes, okay, you beef everything up. That's going to cost money, and that's going to cost me money, because someone else is zerging that caravan. So, part of this, I don't think we really know exactly how caravans will work. I'm sure that will clearly play a role in this. But that is where, when you talk zergs, I worry more about caravans. And then also boats, although it sounds like he kind of put some of that to rest, where he said, if you sink a ship, you can't just spawn it. You have to go back to shore. But
right. I think one of the other things is I don't know how much we're going to be able to have NPC attackers as much as NPC defenders. Assigning defenders to a caravan, assigning defenders to a city, NPCs, sure, that's easy. But I think it takes a little bit more, and could be something that they prevent intentionally, is players taking a bunch of NPCs as part of an attack force. That could very well be part of the anti-zerging functionality, is that the NPC response will be scaled to the size of the force. So if you bring 20 people and there's 20 guards, sure, the guards will try to take care of it. If you bring 50 people and there's only 20 guards and there's 30 residents, well, they might use whatever the best weapons they have, or there might be some basic armory that they can go to and get weapons and go defend the town using the drills that they've been taught or whatever, using all the techniques that they've been trained with. So they might not be the best of fighters, but yeah, you've got 50 people to match them, and it could very well be that that's enough for the guards to be able to resist for long enough for help to come from somewhere nearby.
I was actually hoping that the conversation would come to this specific point so that I could circle back to what I was talking about at the beginning. Because this is actually on my board. What about NPC defenders and not having NPC attackers? And this is where it goes back to it's going to be very difficult. There are so many potential ways to deter attackers or deter attacking via the corruption mechanic. And so
can't do that for a caravan.
Well, no, you don't get corruption for the caravan, but if it's the case where you can hire defenders, but you can't hire attackers, so defending ends up getting an advantage. It's a very difficult thing to balance. And that there's and from the very beginning, they want to, it's not one of the design pillars, risk versus reward, right? So this is where I see a diverging path with not a whole lot of room in between. Is this like we don't really actually care, we just PvP for fun? Or is it we're all real careful and we want to keep what we have? And I think that it's going to be really hard to balance that aspect with caravans and with sieges. What is the cost associated? What's the cost associated with protecting a caravan or what's the cost associated with attacking a caravan? Because if the risk is skewed one way or another, this is the balance. This is the balance point for the game. Like, am I risking more if I attack, or am I risking more just by existing and defending? And it's gonna be tough. I hope that works out, but I think that'll be a key factor in tipping of whether or not the general course of action is that we don't really attack. We just don't really attack. It's not
that's not going to happen. And I think one of the problems that people have when they are envisioning a caravan is it seems like they're just envisioning one single caravan, and you either succeed or you fail, rather than a caravan being a string of wagons, and you can destroy some of those wagons, maybe not all of them, but even if you destroy one, you're reducing the amount of resources that other node has to build up the node that they're going to, or maybe the node that they're coming from. So the reason to attack a caravan is not really, oh, I love PvP, or, oh, I'm going to get all these riches from destroying the caravan. It is, I need to stop that caravan so that node cannot advance higher than my node. And there's also a reason to protect the caravan, right? I want my node to elevate. So if I want a library built in my node, I'm going to do what I need to do in order to protect the caravan that's going to be bringing the resources that's required to build that library. If I want to prevent that village next door from becoming a city and locking my node out of becoming a city, I'm going to be willing to attack that caravan. And I might not succeed in destroying all 4 wagons, but maybe if I destroy 1 wagon, that's enough to reduce it or prevent it from becoming a city or a town long enough that my node will be able to prevail. So the reasons that we're attacking, and this is getting back to the point of meaningful conflict, is the reason to attack is not just, I love PvP, I love killing people, I want to kill people in order to get treasure or loot.
Yeah, I get that. I get the reasoning. I understand the caravan mechanic and what they're for. I'm just thinking that I have a feeling that people are going to cooperate with nodes more than conflict about nodes.
See, I still think there's going to be people that just do it to do it, and I think that's probably.
Well, yeah, that's what I was saying.
And I honestly think that most of the conflict will probably be from people who just want to do it. I'm bored. I'm going to go. It's like raiding the crossroads. Well, why do you? Just it's fun. It's something to do. I really think that because you also probably get people that's actually just what they do as a business. That's how they make their living. They don't necessarily care about a node or your node or their node. They just want to get something out of it. They like PvP. This is the most direct form of PvP, where they're not going to get penalized with corruption or whatever and get something out of it. So I actually think that while, yes, there will probably be some instances where, if we're in the same area digs and we're trying to go a direction and somebody else is trying to also build it, we might go do something to try to interrupt their caravan. I feel like that's probably going to be, it's going to be the smaller percentage of the reason as to why caravans are attacked. But I also think that's not why people will. I don't think they're just going to see, we'll just let caravan after caravan go, because I think there's going to be these groups of people who are just going to want to attack it, just for the hell of it.
And I do want to drop in before we move on to the next topic that I'm actually looking forward to there being at least one server that does what you're saying, Sog, because that's going to be the equivalent of the PvE server. Mm-hmm. And the first PvP arguments I was getting into on the forums right after Kickstarter was saying, I would love for there to be a server where they disable PvP combat, even just the ability to kill other players, and then see what happens. Because some people were saying no, then the metropolises would never be sieged, and I was saying, yeah, I think that people would say, hey, we want different content, so we're gonna cooperate and we're gonna siege this metropolis and we're gonna get some different content, and so you'll still have PvP, but it's going to be cooperative PvP rather than confrontational PvP, because people will want new content and to work together and all that. So I'm hoping that we have a PvE server that's similar to that, where the confrontation is you still have PvP, but it's cooperative PvP rather than confrontational PvP. I don't know that that'll happen, but that would be cool.
There's another part to this too, and that is we talk about hiring defenders, the NPCs, is how well does the AI work in this? We've seen very general sort of fights. I listen to a lot of sort of history of gaming and how things were created, back and forth to work every day. And a lot of things sort of stick out of essentially where once you have players in a world 24/7, they will learn ways to trick the system. And how do you balance that? How do you make it so that it actually is difficult, where maybe a caravan is predominantly a computer-controlled character and not a human-controlled character? How do you make it so it's actually difficult for someone to come in and destroy that? But that's, I guess, another topic for later on. But especially in a world,
segues well into my next topic that I wanted to discuss.
And before we move on, and especially in a world where the change to that world is driven by actual player characters, not NPCs, how much effort gets put into, when you're really driving, you're planning on your world to be driven by the players themselves. How much effort do you actually put into the intelligence of the non-player characters?
Yeah, well, we know that there is a plan to have intelligent non-player characters that respond to player actions, right? That's part of at least for the monster style AI. And I would hope that if they have that technology and it's actually working, that they would apply it to hired NPCs as well that are able to work together in different ways. But I wanted to talk about, we mentioned Neuro asked some great questions about cookie cutter builds and flavor of the month strategies and things like that. And I was like, cookie cutter builds themselves. Steven took this to cookie cutter builds when the question was initially about flavor of the month. And I see these as two different things. So cookie cutter builds are consistent methods designed to defeat static content, right? So you have a cookie cutter build, you build this way.
Hearthstone deck.
Yeah, because this is how the community has figured out is the path of least resistance to accomplish this kind of static content. Now, we're hoping that there isn't a whole lot of static content, but we know that they're talking about having some like small instance areas that will be static content. So I don't think that cookie cutter builds are going to be that much of an issue, because if you're designing a build around something that only exists in a small area, you're probably wasting your time. But that when it comes to things like caravan defense and caravan attacking and node sieges, I see flavor of the month strategies and even a long-term defined meta like we see in League of Legends, or is almost unavoidable unless there are really huge ways to shake it up. Right, because players get set in their ways, and if we assume, based on what Steven has said about these groups and fighting and power struggles within them, that it'll be hard for groups to stay together long enough to be in a position where they can constantly be adjusting their strategies and forcing other people to adapt all the time, that people will get set in their ways and the defense will be the same. And there'll be a slow moving, and it'll be a flavor of the month strategy. So this is how we had some successful caravans like this, so we're going to do it like that. And then we managed to actually catch some caravans, or node siege or whatever. It doesn't matter, because the system actually seems to promote this. Like, we found a way that works. Let's make it work for a while, at least until somebody figures out how to make it not work. And I don't know that there's a solution to that. And I don't know how you avoid there being basically a set meta for it, even though there are different objectives in the guild castle sieges, even though there are different objectives in the nodes, but for the node battles, even though there are lots of caravans going back and forth, that there are going to be pieces that are going to be isolated, and there are going to be ways that individual groups attempt to gain an advantage in that area. And it's hard for me to imagine things being horribly different, like a vast array of different ways to do it. I would love to see that in practice. I'd love to see it be that, but then the opposite problem is that it feels like an unstructured free-for-all, right? Like, if it's changes too much and it's too wild, it's more of like, let's all charge into the battlefield and see what happens. So how then, this is the question for the group, how do you have structured, planned, strategic battles without falling into this trap of we're using the flavor of the month strategy or, arrangement or, I don't know, whatever, you know what I'm asking.
I'll say that you can rely on the primary 8 classes, the first class choice that everybody's going to make, that since the secondary abilities are just going to augment them, we can expect a lot of similarity in that you can always expect your, ranged people are going to be able to position this way and do this thing that synergizes with the, defender's ability to, do the shield wall sort of thing. I think we're going to see a lot of that, where even though there's ways to dynamically build the characters differently, we'll end up seeing a lot of similar strategies being used, because those are the strategies. It's partially because that's how the game's built, and that's partially because that's just how fighting works in real life. Like, if we had, wizards and teleportation and magic shields and stuff, yeah, I would imagine we would find similar fighting patterns in the way that we do things.
If we have
so long as it's just not a
down, we're gonna use some combination of those 8 units to win this battle.
Yeah, but I think when it comes to actual builds, like character for character, I think there's going to be 2 things that make it difficult to come to a very specific cookie cutter or even flavor of the month. One is that I have a feeling it's going to take too long to get what we would consider endgame, that you don't have enough time to make 2, 3, 4, 5 variants of that type of character to see which one works better or not. There just won't simply be the time to do it. And then the other is whatever abilities are and equipment and other things are granted from things that you were physically present for, that you had to be there for, and that, you know, are unique to you or unique to you and everybody that was involved with that certain thing. Suddenly you're starting to get into stuff where, unless the other person was literally next to you the same time, got the exact same loot drops and everything, you know, with you along the way with everything, you're basically your paired twin through it all. There's no way that they're going to have the exact same capabilities and choices that you had. That's what
I'm not concerned about the individual level. I think there's going to be quite a bit of variation there, but the things that we've discussed and talked to Steven about, and the things that we hear about the most, are large group events. So when I think about gameplay in Ashes of Creation, I don't really think that much, and I need to start thinking more about that, is I don't think more about what one person does, but I'm thinking kind of as the group as an entity, right? That I see groups being very, very similar in the sum of the whole, and operating in very, very similar ways to other groups of that size for the same goal. But what do you think, Diggs?
I think that what we have to figure out is the ratio of gamers to role players. Gamers who are just going to say, I don't give a fuck, I'm going to make the cookie cutter build and do flavor of the month because that gives me the optimal kill rate, versus role players who are going to want the builds that they want. You know, they want to be an ice wizard, so they're going to focus everything on ice. And hopefully there will be groups that do that too, so that you have groups that are focused on ice, or groups that are focused on shadow, or groups that are focused on tanking, so that even though you have 8 different primary archetypes, you have several that are focused on ice as their secondary archetype, or shadow as their secondary archetype. And then you also have the racial augments in there as well, so that even within the groups, we should be able to, not within groups, but different groups should have different specializations based on their interests. And then you learn how to fight with your group because you all live in the same node. You know where their houses are. It's not just instance housing, so you're, you know, gathering at their freeholds. When something pops up, monsters come to invade your node, you're going to band with the people who are there. You're going to learn how they fight. You're going to learn how to support their style of fighting. And so hopefully there will always be people who love to have cookie cutter builds, and people who love to have flavor of the month, and people who like to min max. But hopefully this game will allow for people who want to role play and focus on, you know, again, this is my dream. I want to be an ice wizard. I'm not a fire wizard, so I'm not going to take any fire abilities. I'm not going to take any fire augments. I'm only going to focus on ice. And then I surround myself with other people who know how to support my ice powers. They aren't going to care about cookie of the month and cookie cutter and flavor of the month, as long as they can succeed with their strategies, because they know how to support the strengths and weaknesses of their group.
Yeah, I think that there are, from the systems that we've been told about and from the mechanics of the game, I think there are going to be a lot of different ways to play. The discussion with Steven last week and hearing him speak, the two words that jump out, like when he says the word guild, he kind of like lights up a little bit. Like what I used earlier, it's he's raising and he's got a tell that says he has a good hand. Like when he says guild, and if you ask a question about what's happening with this mechanic, he says, well, one guild might, or another guild might, without being prompted on that. And the other thing is that repeatedly, things always get back to the game is about world change, and PvP is the catalyst for that change. So the two things that stand out when I'm listening to Steven talk, even though we led some of the questions that way last week, are that when he's envisioning the game, it appears that he's envisioning the core things about the game as groups of people working together for PvP-related aims that change the world. So that's affected the way that I think about the game. Instead of thinking, you know what, I'd like to be, the farmer and have a freehold and be part of this node, or, you know what, I want to role play and be part of this group that really focuses on shadow or ice, that the systems appear to be in place and there appears to be support for that kind of play. But in listening to Steven talk about the game, those aren't the things that I walk away with. And that goes with, we're just about finishing up, and maybe in the future I want to talk about how, as I go through the documents we have of all of the with all of the information about the game, whenever people ask about something outside of that, they say, but will someone who wants to do this be able to do it? The answer is always yes, right? So let's say I don't really want to PvP. Yeah, you're good. Yeah, you're good. Well, maybe I don't really want to be part of we love solo players. What if I want instance PvE? Yep, we're gonna have that too. What if I want WoW style arena combat, like 1v1 arenas with rank? Yes, we're definitely having that. So I know that we're finishing up, but I want to leave on this note. If we have a rock, paper, scissors combat system, how does 1v1 arena ranking work?
Yeah, I think probably not very well. So a few things I do want to touch on with what you said is we need to also, we've been talking about it, having author bias discussion for Chronicles of Illyria, but we should do that for Ashes of Creation as well. And I think what we are experiencing is the creator bias of Steven in the way he talks about the game. Is he loves PvP, he loves guilds, he loves group conflict, and he loves conflict. And he especially thinks that the way to change is through conflict, and that rewards are not worth anything unless you have conflict. And that's why he's not envisioning what happens if the server decides to cooperate rather than go through conflict. And I think there's lots of ways that he talks about the game where he's envisioning his way that he loves to play, and doesn't necessarily understand the mindsets of people who don't have his play style, although he's hoping to accommodate them, as you said. So that would be a great episode for us to have something where we cover that to some degree.
Yeah, there was one other thing I wanted to say about the groups is that build to no build, one of the things that's also going to be a really big driving factor is the people that are just hardcore PvPers. They just combination of having the knowledge, the reflexes, the coordination. You're going to have your little pockets of your elites in the battles. You're going to have your little groups of 3 to 5. Like that was one of my things that I always enjoyed playing PlanetSide, is not being the biggest group, but being one of the most influential. And that's one of the things that I feel like we're going to see a lot of, is not the guys that hold the line being the heroes. It's the super badass guys that can, climb up over this wall and, sneak around and flank the casters that have the protection spell. Those are the ones, those are the people that you really have to worry about and watch out for. And so I think that's what we're going to see a lot of, is people that they know how to fight in a group, they know how to kind of hold the line, they know how to survive and not overextend. But it's the people that are really, really adept with the stuff, really well trained, really well coordinated, that are going to be pushing the line, that are going to be flanking, that are going to be doing the big moves. And when it comes to that, it probably doesn't even matter what class they're using.
Let me just say one other thing. What I was typing in chat, it is just human nature to try to be the best. So, I mean, I think we just have a name for it now. So
That's not true.
For most people, because it is a game, and the goal of most games inherently is to
Westerners, win. But is it a game or is it a meow?
Well,
I think
that's a different discussion.
Creation is a game. Everything I read about it, it makes me think that it's more of a game, more of an mmorpg with progression and victory being key instead of a meow style.
Even a meow, no one starts a task with the idea of being the worst at it, right?
Yeah, you don't have to, but it's not a dichotomy. The world is not binary.
Emotions are not that complex for most people.
Well,
that's a different discussion.
I'll give you this. Some people, they play to be the best. Some people just play to have fun.
Yeah.
Or be mediocre.
All right. Well, I guess we are basically at the end here. That is a whole nother discussion that I really want to get into. We don't have time right now. The goals of players. But yeah, so we will be back in 2 weeks. And for those who don't know, who do have an interest in Chronicles of Valyria, we also have now started a show that alternates with this show. So same time, same place this coming week. And we had a wonderful show there with Snipe Hunter last week. So, certainly join us there. I will also say, if you follow our Twitter and you are interested in Valyria, there is currently a contest or something to enter for actually a mayor package in that game. So check it out. And thanks for joining us. We will, I guess, see you in 2 weeks or next week if you want to join us. So see ya.